So I was going through placing some bets for this weekend's UFC card, and the more I thought about the main event, Mateus Gamrot versus Salkilld, I realized that this fight actually is not close whatsoever. I tried to go over the different paths to victory for either fighter, and I realized that all signs point towards the slight favorite here in Salkilld. Now, the reason why I really wanted to make this video is because I think the betting odds -135 is what he opened at, but he's moved to the -150 range. I think -145 on some books, -155 on some books. So you'll get him in that range. Anywhere in the -140s, you're probably on the lower end. So I would just take that. But these odds are just extremely playable. The market is pricing this fight closer than what I think. Now this fight could play out fairly close at the end of the day, but I just see this fight being like a 70-30, maybe even a 75-25 to kill and Saul killed. So I think we're getting a pretty big discount here. I think Mateus Gamrot is being a little bit overrated in this scenario. Now, Mateus Gamrot at one point looked like potentially the future of the lightweight division. At one point, he was, I think, a backup fighter for a title fight between, I think it was Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev. I think he was the backup for that fight. So at one point, he was in title conversations. But since then, we've learned a lot about Gamrot. And the issue with Gamrot is he just hasn't evolved whatsoever. So I'm going to break this one down for you guys, right? Like when you go look at a fight, the way I see it is there's three ways you could potentially win a fight. You could win a fight by submission, you could win a fight by knockout, and you could win a fight by decision. Now, if you go look at this, Mateus Gamrot only really has one path to victory here, and that's to win by decision. Gamrot is not overall, a dangerous fighter. He definitely does not have any real danger on the feet. And, he's coming off a submission win. I do know that. I think that was to Esteban Ribovic here, but that's a huge step down in competition. Not someone like a Killen Salkilld. His other win, Ludovic Klein, once again, I still think Killen Salkilld is a level above RDA. This fight was interesting because I remember having a bet on Mateus Gamrot in this RDA fight, and Gamrot gets dropped early and then just kind of has to hug and hold. And you could call it smothering, but I call it stalling. Now, there's fighters that smother their opponents, like Islam Makhachev versus JDM. JDM got smothered. Hamzat Chimaev versus DDP. DDP got smothered. What Gamrot did to RDA, I don't call that smothering. I call that, holding on for dear life. And RDA just, didn't do enough in that fight. And I think it was -400, yeah, -480 as a favorite. So huge favor against RDA. And Gamrot, it does not look pretty when Gamrot fights. And, like I said, it's not about the control time. It's just about, the way it looks optically. Gamrot looks like he's holding on for dear life. I think that led to this Dan Hooker split decision loss. Some people say that, Gamrot did enough. I think that, that's a Dan Hooker win in my opinion. So just in general, you look at these losses. I know the losses are very high level. I mean, a 2022 Beneil Dariush, extremely high level. Charles Oliveira, one of the best in the game. Dan Hooker, somewhat high level. So the losses are high level, but I think Quillen Salkilld falls in that category. And if you kind of just go look at it right here, Salkilld is going to have a 5-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's going to have a height advantage in this fight as well. So 6 foot versus 5'10". 75 inches of reach versus 70.5 inches of reach. So Salkilld on the feet is going to be more dangerous. We've also seen Salkilld, win a fight by knockout against Beneil Dariush. Obviously not as impressive in 2026 because Dariush's chin might be the worst chin in the entire UFC right now. But obviously it's this one, the highlight head kick knockout against Nasrat Haqparast, where, he left Haqparast, I think, leaving on a stretcher, just like kind of convulsing on the ground after his head kick. Really scary knockout. He goes to Abu Dhabi to get Haqparast out of there. And, Haqparast, hometown faith-ish fighter for Abu Dhabi. Killen Salkilld goes there, head kick knock in the first round, absolute beauty of a shot. And then obviously, the famous knockout over Anshul Jubilee in 19 seconds. Shout out Anshul Jubilee. Beating Anshul Jubilee just makes you championship bound, in my opinion, because, he's better than Habib. He's better than Conor McGregor. He's better than all of them. So beating Anshul Jubilee makes you championship bound. But just in general, I say this to say that, we go back to the path to victory, right? Now, I think that Mateus Gamrot is like kind of known to have pillow hands. Like Charles Oliveira, who I think has a pretty, not weak chin. He has good recoverability, but Charles Oliveira is on the chinnier side and he doesn't take big shots very well. He likes to, go to the ground and recover, go onto his back. People drop Charles Oliveira all the time. And, Charles Oliveira was able to walk Mateus Gamrot down, eat a bunch of like very clean, very like, take what look like Gamrot's like best shots on the feet. And Gamrot is like a competent striker. It's just that he has nothing to give on the feet. Like he's not going to throw with any like power. He just doesn't have power. So that's one thing that Gamrot misses, right? And like with not having power, especially someone against like Killing Salkilld, Salkilld A is going to be at range, and B, he's just not worried about anything coming his way when it comes to the strikes against Gamrot. On top of that, similar to Charles Oliveira, Mateus Gamrot has this like weird chin. He hasn't been knocked out in his career yet, but trust me, this could easily be the first time he gets knocked out in his career. And I think like stylistically, it could potentially just like go in that direction because if you look at some of the other wins Gamrot has, a win like Arman Sarukian, right? This is a very good win. Of course, Arman Sarukian is going to be an amazing win. That being said, Arman Sarukian is someone that will wrestle with you. Similar with Benil Dariush will wrestle with you. And Benil Dariush, in my opinion, even to this day, is a top 3 wrestler in the lightweight division. I think when it comes to wrestling, maybe top 4. I think Taporia, Arman, and Charles in the lightweight division have better wrestling than Benil Dariush. But I think after that, it's straight Benil Dariush is the next best wrestler. It's just unfortunate that he literally can't take a punch. If a fly goes around him, he'll probably get knocked the fuck out. So it's unfortunate. But when it comes to wrestling skill, I think Benil Dariush, that's how highly I rate his wrestling. I think him versus Arman would be a crazy wrestling match. And, like I said, these two guys, these are really good wins for Gamrot, but these guys are people that will wrestle with you. Now, Killing Salkilld, he has a wrestling grappling background. That is what he truly is, except he's actually developing really good striking and he has power. On top of that, Gamrot gets dropped all the time. So now things are just lining up on the feet for Killing Salkilld. On the feet, when it comes to, how does this fight end by knockout? All the equity goes to Killing Salkilld for that specific path to victory. Now, that's interesting because, Gamrot's going to get dropped on the feet. So Gamrot is going to be afraid to take big shots. Killing Salkilld can throw big shots. Killing Salkilld can throw from a range that Gamrot is just not in because he has a 5-inch reach advantage. And on top of that, Killing Salkilld doesn't have to worry about strikes coming his way on the feet. So this is going to be a very comfortable night in the office for Killing Salkilld, in my opinion. Now you go back to Killing Salkilld. He's had, grappling performances in the past. Against Yanal Ashmus, he shot a shit ton of takedowns. Jamie Malarkey, he was able to choke him out. Benil Dariush, he was able to defensively grapple against Benil Dariush and stop a bunch of takedowns. He got taken down a couple times, but was able to get back up and still in the first round put Benil Dariush away. Obviously, putting him away isn't a big deal, but he was able to stifle the wrestling of Benil Dariush. Now, this is going to be important because Killing Salkilld has the tools to stand back up. On top of that, Gamrot's style of, smothering and wrestling all the time, shooting a million takedowns, it's there for a reason. It's like Marab, right? Like Marab has to shoot so many takedowns because he can't control you really well. Ideally, you get a takedown like Hamzat's where he only needs one takedown to control you for all 5 minutes. But Mateus Gamrot is not going to have the best control. So, Killing Salkild's going to get back up over and over again. And every time this fight's in space, like I said, we mentioned on the feet, this fight just extremely favors Killing Salkilld on the feet. So if I think about it, all the knockout equity goes to Killing Salkilld. If I think about, this fight going to the judges, this fight going to a decision, I think majority of the equity still lies with Killing Salkilld. Because if I think about it, he can grapple really well. He has the get up game to, not get smothered by Mateus Gamrot. Gamrot doesn't have the best control, but he does push a crazy pace on you. So on top of that, I think that, Gamrot's going to really have to hold Killing Salkilld down like for dear life for 25 minutes. And I think like the game plan is just extremely obvious and extremely easy to prep for a Killing Salkilld. On top of that, if Salkilld just gets, a couple damaging shots off, maybe he rocks Mateus Gamrot, who's prone to being rocked. He also just picks up rounds by, having the bigger moment here. We know that control time is being scored less and less, as it should. I mean, in the rules, control time is not to be scored unless, it is like the only thing you can kind of score in the round. So, Gamrot, who's not known for crazy ground and pound, Gamrot, who's not known to pull off any crazy submissions, he's coming off a submission against someone who just has no ground game in Ribovic. And Ribovic himself, not that good. He went life and death with someone like Daniel Zellhuber. We thought Zellhuber was a decent prospect, but Zellhuber turned out to be an absolute bust. So, Ribovic is on like that level of someone who is basically a bust, and he's going life and death with a Daniel Zellhuber. He's not that sick. Has no ground game. So, Gamrot pulls off the sub, cool, but Oliveira dominates him. He beats Ludovic Klein, who also has a really weak ground game, and Dan Hooker, who has bad fight IQ and not the best ground game, but, maybe a more seasoned one than Ludovic Klein just because of the people Dan Hooker's seen inside the octagon. He comes out there and wins a split decision. Jalen Turner fight goes to a split decision. Jalen Turner is a very, iffy type of fighter. And, he was able to go to split decision. Obviously Gamrot gets the win, but it's not super convincing. Salkilld, I think, has more win equity when it comes to the fight going the distance. I think he can get the moments. I think on the feet, the round is basically Salkild's until Gamrot takes it away from him. Because on the feet, Salkild's gonna be winning all the minutes. If the fight goes to the ground, Gamrot's not really gonna do much, and Salkild doesn't need a lot of time to swing the round in his favor. So Gamrot's really gonna have to hold on for the entire round almost in order to kind of bank the round. So I think if you're talking about decision equity, I think obviously Gamrot can win rounds with control time, but it's not something I love in a 5 round fight. So I'm gonna give majority of the win equity when it comes to decision to Saul Killed. I think all of the win equity when it comes to winning by knockout goes to Saul Killed as well. And Saul Killed is a jujitsu guy, so like Gamrot not being a huge submission threat. I mean, if we look at Gamrot, he's got 6 wins by submission, and he's got obviously this last win by submission. But prior to that, when was his last submission? I guess like, does this count submission to strikes? I actually don't know if they count that as a submission, but basically what I'm trying to say is he's submitting like in his, career prior to the UFC, low level, non UFC level guys. He's not really getting submissions on high level UFC guys. He hasn't, except for Esteban Ribovic, who doesn't even count as high level. So he's never submitted a high level UFC lightweight. He's not a huge submission threat. Salkilld is a jiu-jitsu guy. He is a grappler. He's good on the ground. So I don't think there's really any equity for either guy to find a submission. Obviously, Oliveira subbed Gamrot. That was the first time Gamrot got finished. And Salkilld, we're not going to call him Oliveira just yet. Maybe he is. Honestly, I don't think he is that good. So we're not going to call him Oliveira just yet. But at the end of the day, I think the knockout is super live. I think, Salkilld is live to win by decision. I think there's some small percentage chance that Gamrot wins this fight on the scorecards. But honestly, at the odds we're getting, with Killing Salkilld being just a minus 135, minus 140 favorite, I think this is an insane spot. So honestly, I don't see this fight being close. Like if you can kind of tell me in the comments, how does Gamrot win this fight? Like, are you really expecting Gamrot to go out there and just hold Salkilld down? Because another thing to notice, Salkilld called out this opponent. He called out Mateus Gamrot for a fight. That's also interesting because obviously, he knows Gamrot's style. He's not going to call out this fight if this isn't something that, he knows he's capable of. He's got a grappling background. And I think the Dariush fight is really telling. I mean, Dariush, like I said, still one of the best grapplers in the division, one of the best wrestlers in the division. It does suck that he has no chin whatsoever. I think he beats a lot of these guys with the chin. I picked Dariush to beat BSD, so maybe I'm like a little bit biased here. And obviously that pick really aged like fucking milk. But at the end of the day, this win over Moicano aging pretty well. I'm pretty sure Moicano, picked up some wins. The Chris Duncan win. I guess he lost to Makhachev, but Moicano is a decent fighter. Honestly, Moicano is probably like a similar level to Gamrot in my opinion, maybe just like slightly lower than a Gamrot level fighter. And Moicano, he has a finish over Jalen Turner while Gamrot has split decision. I know that's not like a really smart way to look at it, but just in general, like these guys are kind of on a similar level. And Dariush proved that his wrestling is even better. His grappling is better than someone like Moicano, who's known for his jujitsu. And Salkilld was just able to kind of hold it down easily, push off Dariush, boom, boom, get him out of there. And I think that with someone like Gamrot, maybe he doesn't get him out of there, but he's gonna hurt Gamrot. He's gonna win those moments, and he's gonna be the one doing more damage. Like at the end of the day, I don't see Gamrot putting Salkilld in any threatening submissions. I don't see Gamrot doing any damage to Salkilld with ground and pound or on the feet. I see Salkilld doing damage to Gamrot on the feet. I see Salkilld, potentially threatening a sub to maybe get back up. So I see Salkilld being the more dangerous fighter. And I see absolutely zero danger coming from Gamrot in this matchup. And I just think Salkilld potentially is just a little bit too high level to be a fighter that you can just absolutely hold down, hold on for dear life. I don't think he's an old washed up RDA that, Gamrot just kind of, it's a UD, but like, girl, watch this fight. It's kind of a pathetic performance in my opinion. A washed up Dan Hooker with no fight IQ. Ludovic Klein is just a level below. Esteban Rivic is just a level below. So these are just, the wins are just a level below, I think, a Salkilld. And I think when he fights someone of a Salkild's level, who we put on a, Benny Dariush's level, we put on a Dan Hooker's level for sure. Maybe not Oliveira, but when even like a Jalen Turner, this is a split decision. We put Salkilld on this level, and when Gamrot fights these guys, it's not convincing, and it's always sometimes a bit close. And because I think there's a bunch of equity on the knockout as well here, I'm gonna have to pick Killing Salkilld. I just don't see any real path to victory for Gamrot. Like I said, let me know in the comments if you think I'm tripping, but I think Salkild's live here. I'm gonna parlay him up in a bunch of spots. I'm probably just gonna take a big straight on him as well. maybe not if he moves into like the minus 160 range by the time I get, the money down on the straight. But I already have him in a bunch of parlays, and he's kind of my anchor for this week. So Salkill's gonna be my anchor for this week's card. Let me know what you guys are playing. Really curious to know. I mean, it's a pretty interesting fight night, pretty shitty fight night card. And honestly, UFC 330 is also pretty garbage. So we're kind of in the trenches when it comes to UFC right now, but betting wise, I think there's still some very cool spots. I'm gonna kind of anchor everything around Salkilled. Let me know what you guys think about that, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.